Stephen, when you look at Oregon, a team Ohio State lost a close one with during the regular season, expectations heading into the rematch.
I think the 32-31 loss is the expectation again. Not necessarily who wins and who loses, but just the way that played out, where these are two heavyweight fighters who are going to throw some haymakers, and one person's going to knock down the other person, and the other person's going to knock down the other person, and they're going to get to the 12th round and be like, man, I've got a lot of respect for the guy on the other end, but now it's time to go win this thing. I thought what ended up deciding that game, though, is Ohio State made the mistakes and Oregon didn't, right? Will Howard not getting down enough time for them to get a field goal off. Jeremiah Smith and the OPI that kind of cost them field position. Will Howard fumbling a snap. Quinshon Judkins fumbling in that game. Denzel Burke having easily his worst game as a Buckeye. The defensive line not showing up and making Dylan Gabriel field them. The defensive game plan, the way we talked about Ryan Day and the offense in the first segment, well, that was a game after that where Jim Knowles and his defense had to do some soul searching and figure some things out and get back to the reasons why Ryan Day hired him 2 years ago to come fix his defense. We saw that then, and we got the offensive side of that a month and a half later from that. If they can correct the mistakes and just play clean on a neutral field, I think Ohio State could pull this off. Now, you can say the same thing about Oregon. They did not make a lot of mistakes. They did play clean, and they also did something special, right? They tried to go at an onside kick and they ended up pulling it off, plus a few other things as well. That's how you win these games. You got to play clean, you got to be aggressive, and you can't make the mistakes. You can't make the mistakes. And you got to have something up your sleeve where it's very clear that you were saving this for this team, this opponent on this stage. That's the formula to win these games. We saw that against Tennessee. Ohio State's got to be able to do that again against Oregon.
Matchups. What do you think are the important matchups? You don't have to go specific players if you want to go groups, but what does Ohio State need to do if it looks like a win, if it adds up to a win?
Yeah, I think it starts in the trenches on both sides. I think the offensive line obviously looks very different than when they took the field against Oregon last time. When you went to Eugene on October 12th, you had a left tackle who's probably going to be a first round draft pick. You had an All-American left guard, the future Remington Award winner at center, and then a young guy with promise at right guard, and then a veteran right tackle. Well, a month and a half later, you've got that All-American left guard is now playing left tackle because your first round left tackle had a season-ending injury in the second half of that game. Your Remington Award-winning center is rolling around in a scooter after tearing his Achilles, and so now your guy who was a starting center last year, who of course had to play left guard at one point this year, is now playing your center position this year. Meanwhile, at your guard spots, you've got a rotation between that young guy who had some promise, Integra Shapola, but didn't necessarily hasn't been all that great, and two other young guys with promise who are all rotating through those spots. So the only consistent thing you have is the guy who's been your veteran right tackle is still your veteran right tackle. The other four guys look grossly different than when they did the last time you played this team. While Oregon has four guys up front who are elite, one of which didn't play in the first game, and Jordan Birch, and he's expected to play in this game. So can Ohio State's offensive line hold up the way it did against Tennessee? And also can Ryan Day and Chip Kelly scheme up some things? I think it starts there, but you can flip it as well. Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau just played their best games as a duo as Ohio State football players. And that's including the Penn State game JT Tuimoloau had in 2022 and the Cotton Bowl performance Jack Sawyer had to close out last season. This was the best game that those two have played because you felt both of them all game. That's now their standard. Can they do that again? Not the counting stats, but just can Dylan Gabriel feel you? And then outside of that, it's the skill position guys. Was Denzel Burke's bad game a fluke? And if so, maybe we see a better version of this Ohio State secondary. While I don't know if anybody has an answer for Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Cardinal Tate, but Oregon has the best case of having any level of an answer for those three.
When you look at Oregon, what concerns you most if you're Ohio State? If you're in those meetings, what about the Ducks? Is like, man, we can't let them do this.
It's definitely that defensive line with Jordan Birch and Derek Harmon and Mateo Uyunglele. It starts with those guys because we've seen Ohio State put makeshift offensive lines together against Penn State, Indiana, and now Tennessee, and they hold up pretty well. But those are teams where they've got quality guys and they have one NFL elite first round pick dude on it. Well, Oregon's got three of them. Two for sure, and then we'll see with Derek Coleman. But they've got potentially three of those guys, and so now it's littered all throughout the defensive line. How do you scheme up around that to mitigate the issues that are never going away for this offensive line, given where it is right now, while trying your best to maximize the strengths that they bring to the table? That's going to be the question of the game. That, and then also Will Howard and Dylan Gabriel, which one can play clean and not make the mistake at the worst time of the game?
What do you lean into offensively if you're Chip Kelly and Ryan Day? I know there's Smith. You know, they did a really nice job of getting the screen game, the tunnel screens, and they got guys in space. What do you lean into against Oregon?
The same thing. Rinse and repeat. Now, do you run the same plays? Of course not. No, you have new things that you've been working on for this game. But rinse and repeat. This is throw it. Throw it. You should come in with the mindset that you're going to throw it at least 35 times. Now, they only threw it 29 times. Will Howard had 31 dropbacks, so we scrambled on two of them. But they also put that game away so quickly that they could start running the ball. Throw the ball because it's going to open up your ability to run the ball. If you are establishing Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka and Carnell Tate and even Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, if you're establishing those guys as receiving threats early, it backs off those safeties, it lightens up the box, and then you can get Travion and Quinshon cooking in the run game. But it starts with establishing the unit that is better than any unit in this game, and that's Ohio State's wide receiver unit.